Welcome to Stories That Matter. Thank you for coming out on July 27th. So our next storyteller, Carl Grimsman.
This is a story of how I almost killed my wife's boss. Many years ago, when I was still a young man, I lived with my beloved wife, Julia, in rural upstate New York. Julia worked at a public library in a small city south of us. She was somewhat older than I and had been by then a librarian for the better part of 20 years and was an accomplished reference librarian. An opportunity came in the form of a job opening at a college in a small city north of us. She was intrigued. There's a difference between the public library world and the academic library world in procedure and collection and clientele, but she seemed to be ready for a fresh start, and even though she would be discontinuing her state pension buildup, she took the plunge and applied, was interviewed, and was offered the job and accepted it. She and I went up there one sunny afternoon after that, hobnobbed with the director, toured the big airy building, which, as it turns out, was designed by another old friend of hers. What I left out was that she had an old friend that worked there and who suggested she get that. So he designed that building when he was an architect back in Baltimore. So she had two little connections there, and it seemed like this was going to be a beautiful arrangement. And the job came with a special welcome dinner with a certain benefactor of the library, Sebastian Maynard Welch, who even the library was named for him. And so there we were, pulling up at the big Victorian house on a cold, wet January night, evenings precisely at 6 p.m., ushered in through the big oak doors and enjoyed drinks and hors d'oeuvres in the high-ceiling living room, flanked by leather-bound volumes and a crackling fire, and then invited into the dining room for a candle-lit dinner prepared by Mrs. Higgins, the cook, replete with linen, crystal, little silver bowls with salt and pepper at each setting with little tiny spoons. There were finger bowls and pineapple upside down cake for dessert and lots of good conversation. It was an elegant gateway into Julia's inaugural year at the library in her new career, so to speak, which stretched out smoothly through the spring and summer. But one day in the fall, she came home in tears. She just had a disastrous evaluation from the director, full of trumped-up charges, like, I don't know, she was late often or didn't get along with the professors, and none of it was true. She somehow found out that her hire had been designed to be for only 1 year, that they had brought her in there in the interim to let the person that they really wanted to get free to come in. So she was in pieces, having redirected her career and having the moral outrage of her false evaluation besmirching her record, by which her contract would not be renewed. I, as a guy, wanted to fix it. But there was nothing I could think of to do to rectify the situation. I was working as a carpenter at the time. Next morning at the job site, at coffee break, I spilled the story in a really bothered way to my boss and the other carpenter of our small crew. We were sitting on the floor in the house that we were remodeling, and my boss straightforward and matter-of-factly says, well, in a case like that, you have to kill the guy. He was from Long Island originally. Kind of a hard-nosed guy. What? Was he serious? But the way he said it, he looked out into space as he said it, almost like he was reminiscing. The other carpenter put a stamp on it by turning to me with a quick nod. Kill the guy, I said. You have no choice, my boss said. It's what a man's got to do. Now, I knew there was a code of men, but what the hell? This was pre-internet, of course, and I didn't even have Robert Bly in his book Iron John to tell me how a man should act. About all I had was movies like The Godfather. So it seemed like a horrible idea, but the fact that I respected these men, and then there was the matter of Julia's honor to be avenged. So I started to plan the deed, even though the whole thing seemed surreal to me, and the thought of it made me sick. So, how would I do it? Could I possibly get away with it? He was a shorter man, 10, 15 years older than I, slender, but by no means frail. I kept feeling my hands around his neck. I had strong hands then, still do. What would I do with the body? I thought of a rest stop, a kind of pull-off in between the work and home with a thick patch of woods behind it. Maybe. I proceeded for weeks to try to plan this, but I seemed to be losing steam. It was going slower and slower, like I was in a little steamboat going through a channel that was getting narrower and shallower and more full of weeds, till I hopped out and had to pull that boat like Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen, until the mud and rushes got so thick that I could go no further and my murder plot was stuck. This was aggravated by the fact of Julia was being treated worse and worse at work in the form of silent and overt abuse, coupled with the fact that they had actually offered her 3 extra months in the interim, presumably so that other person could get there, which she had taken, partly out of stubbornness and partly to keep our income stream going. I don't know why the director and others had to be so mean about it, Maybe it's like with chickens. I had done some farming, and I witnessed how if a chicken is ill or injured, other chickens will begin to pick until sometimes with disastrous results. Well, she come home finally telling about the Christmas party. It was late fall now, and this was going to be a catered evening affair at the library for staff and spouses, to which she said, "I'm definitely not going." And I said, "Yes, we are going." Suddenly galvanized as though reanimated from the dead. I said, "We're not going to let them get the best of us." That was only part of my reasoning, because in my mind I was thinking, wow, this is a chance for me to do something. I don't know what yet. But I said, we're going to make an appearance and then we can go. And so that came up pretty quickly, and off we went. She acquiesced to that, knew I had some kind of force behind me. And in the car on the way up, dark, of course, at that hour, 45 minutes on up there, we didn't do much talking. And I'm not sure that I even then knew exactly how my move was going to go. But I do remember spending the time gathering myself, steeling myself, centering. We get there and park. We go in. The room is very dim. Christmas lights twinkling in strings around the room. Holiday music playing. Many eyes upon us. Like, what's she doing here? And what kind of nerve she had to show up. And she points over to, there he is. I said, good, I'm going to talk to him and then we can go. So I pad on over and I say, Paul, I'm Julia's husband. He nods in recognition. And I'm standing sort of beside him rather than straight on with him, kind of looming over him, almost touching him. And I say, Paul, I just wanted to say that everything that's happened with hiring her and her evaluation and the treatment that she's having, has been having, I said, that is what it is. I said, but I need you to treat her with the utmost of courtesy and respect for the rest of her days here. If she tells me that that's not what's happening, then I'm going to take it personally. It's going to be personal. Do you hear me? And he nodded. He seemed nervous, but he played it cool. He's a professional. So I didn't know exactly what effect I had had. But it worked. It was smooth for her, tolerable for the next few weeks. They laid off. And then she came home one day, having been relieved of her job, feeling very much relieved, and with a nice fat check for around 6 weeks full salary for the rest of the time that she was agreed upon. And it wasn't long before she was back working at the public library in the small city south of us, and they were glad to have her. As for me, well, I reflect on it and feel a certain satisfaction that I felt then that has reverberated to this very day. A sort of settledness on the affair and a certain self-validation that occurred there for me. And ultimately, I would say it was an initiation. Yeah, into manhood.
don't know, I'm kind of fond of option one there. You know, like that. I like that little, the rest stop thing in the woods, and yeah, I don't know. That's just me. I don't. What the heck? Okay, Carl. Thank you, Carl. Carl obviously has been a carpenter, landscape artist, poet, and novelist, which I didn't know about. So, very good. You could maybe read some of your stuff at open mic night. He's from New York originally, and I don't know, how long have you lived here? 29 years. Okay, so that's almost a native. So. I asked him what animal he liked, and he said zebras, because they have cool stripes and they run very fast. So